Hello to the folks who are just hopping on. We are going to give it just one quick minute to let a few more people join us, and then we are going to begin the webinar today. And hello to everyone hopping on. Looks like we have a great turnout for Hanger Automation with Evolve. So I'll go ahead and just say thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is Hanger Automation from start to finish. Today's webinar is being presented by Jason Earl, Evolve Product Manager. Jason has real-world experience in the MEP space, and today he is going to show you how to make hanger placement a total piece of cake with Evolve. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and we are going to forward the recording to all registrants. You can always find all of our webinar recordings on the Evolve YouTube channel. So if you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar. We may have time at the end of the session to take a few questions. All right, and with that, I am passing things over to Jason.
Thank you, Marina. All right, so we'll get started here. I've got a couple slides that we're gonna work through before we kind of get into the demonstration of the workflow and talk about some of the tools that we're going to be working with today. So to get started here, we're talking about hanger automation with Evolve from start to finish. So we'll be covering both Evolve Electrical and Evolve Mechanical in this webinar. All right, so to get started, let's kind of talk about the workflow before we jump in. So where we're going to start, with this workflow is, you've got Evolve. Maybe you've tried the hangers tool and maybe you've placed some hangers, but you're not entirely sure. So we'll just kind of go from start to finish and cover everything here. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is set up your profiles. So with one of the tools, they are actually called profiles. In mechanical, if you're using the ITM hangers, it's really just the ITM hanger configuration. But really what we're talking about is setting up configurations. So those are things like your hanger spacing, what type of hanger you're placing, whether or not it's got attachments on it, and then any sort of collision avoidance and collision detection options. So all of those kind of setup things. Next up, what we're going to do is we need to model something. So what are we going to put our hangers on? Those are the things that we need to model. Then we're going to populate our hangers. So that's where Evolve really comes in. That's where we're doing all the automation and saving you a ton of time. Lastly is going to be your finishing touches. So once those hangers are placed, there's going to be some small changes and tweaks that you'll want to make, most likely. So things like adjusting attachments. So maybe you kind of went carte blanche with deck inserts, but some of them you need to change because you're going to hang one of the rods off strut, those types of things. And then customized hangers. So if you've ever used our hanger families before, or if you haven't, we'll look at those today. But you can start to make some really customized hanger configurations. So that might be something that you're interested in doing there at the end. All right, so with that out of the way, let's jump into Revit and let's start going through everything here. All right, so we're really going to start with electrical. So I've got electrical pulled up here, but a lot of what I talk about in electrical is going to apply to mechanical as well. So mechanical has the hanger placement feature, the exact same that electrical has. However, there's an additional option in there for ITM trapezes. So we'll start with this and then we'll move over to mechanical. All right, so as you can see here in this model, I've already got my conduit run. I've got a mechanical model with some duct and some pipe as well. So that's the first thing we need. The models that I'm working with today are the Evolve sample models. So those, if you have Evolve, they're available on our website. You can download those. Just log into the licensing portal and then go to company properties and you'll be able to find those. All right, so within those and within our template, we've got some pre-configured hanger profiles, and those are the ones that we're going to be working with today. So let's take a look at those and let's talk a little bit about that. And then we'll go on to the actual workflow of placing our hangers. So within the hanger placement dialog that we have here, the first thing that I need to do is select my profile. So in this sample model that I have here, we've got quite a few profiles already set up. If you're just starting out, feel free to start with these. And then as you get a little more comfortable, you can start customizing and creating your own. So how do we go about doing that? What we're going to do is we're going to go into our cogs, our settings here, and we're going to create our profile. So where I got to it was from here, but that's not the only place you can get to it from. We can get to it from our little drop down here, or from our settings as well. We can get to it from there as well. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and I'm not going to quite cover everything in full depth just for the sake of time, but I'll make it a point to try to point out as much as I can. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our common settings. So that's things like hanger spacing, so along a straight path, how far apart are our hangers. Distance from end, so this is going to be a change of direction. On electrical, this is going to be any bend in your run. On mechanical, it's going to be any fitting. Distance from union, these are going to be things like couplings or unions, right? And then width rounding, this has to do with the trapeze width. Typically, trapezes are made with unistrut or angle iron, unistrut being more common, especially in electrical. And typically, we want to round those to 2 inches. However, you can adjust this to other values as well. Mineral lac here. For those not familiar with the term mineral lac, that's really a brand name. But this is talking about single conduit hangers. This one will only be in electrical. So these are going to be your settings for placing single conduit hangers when you have just kind of one run that kind of breaks off, typically from a group of runs, and places that there. So we can enable it or disable it, whether or not we want to even use that. And then we can select our hanger type. So out of the box, this is going to work with the mini hanger V2. If that's not in your project, we could load that in from our family browser. Next up is our hardware size. The hardware sizes available are 1/4 inch on up to 1/2 inch. And then you also have an option for the maximum conduit size. So typically, you probably wouldn't place a single conduit hanger on anything above maybe 2 inch or 3 inch. So we can set that there as well. Next up are family settings. So this is where I'm going to set up what I want my hanger to actually be made up of, right? So starting to put some of the information in BIM right here. All right, the first thing that we've got here is the hanger type. My favorite thing about this feature here is auto detect. So what auto detect does is it decides for me based on what I select, and we'll see this a little bit later, which hanger family to use. So with Evolve, there's 4 hanger families, and then there's 2 versions of each family. So you've got a family for 1 tier, 2 tier, 3 tier, and on up to 4 tiers. And then there are versions of those with hardware and without. The ones with hardware, they're a little bit heavier. However, you get the benefit of being able to schedule out the individual hardware pieces. The no hardware, obviously not modeling the hardware. However, there's still information about what size hardware. That's going to run a little bit faster in those large models. So auto detect here just lets me tell the program, hey, based on what I select, figure out which hanger family to use. All right, the hanger attachment here. This is going to be where the rods are attaching to structure or to some supplemental support. So what attachment do I want to use? Depending on your use case, you might set this. So if you know everything is really going into the deck, you might do blue banger. If you know you're hanging off supplemental supports, then there's a good chance you may use beam clamp or embed. Embed there being a spring nut, for those familiar with that. Or you might set it to none, because once you place your hangers, you're going to make an individual assessment, maybe groups of hangers at a time, hopefully to save you time, to set those hanger attachments. Or if you're just not worried about modeling it, you've got that option as well. Down in the strut configuration here, this is configuring the actual strut that's on the hanger. Conduit position, that's going to determine where is the conduit. So I think if I hover over here, nope. So that's whether the conduit's going to be on top of the strut or below the strut. So we can actually have our conduit be above or below. And we're having it on bottom. So you might be thinking, why would I ever strap conduit to the bottom of a strut? You really can't strap to that. Well, over here in the strut type, we can actually invert the strut. So we can have it facing upside down, or we can have double strut or back-to-back strut. So that's where conduit on bottom would start to make sense. Next up is strut size. So this is your strut depth, really. So we have all of the available sizes. So 7/8 down onto 3 1/4 inch super strut and everything in between. Again, our strut type we just talked about. By default, it's facing up. However, you have other options available as well. All right, down here on the bottom left, we've got our rod configuration. The gap distance here allows you to control how much space you have from your conduits to that rod. So if you want to leave extra space, you could increase this, or if you're just worried about having enough for a strut strap, you could probably leave this at the default. The beam offset here actually allows you to place a gap when a beam is encountered. So typically that's when you're going to use a beam clamp. So you can set that beam offset here. Typically 1 inch is fine. And then you can check use beam clamp, and it will actually take that one rod that encounters that beam, and it'll convert that hanger attachment to a beam clamp. So really nice option there. Center rod here. So all of our hanger families do have a center rod. So it's like a third rod in the center for extra support. By default, it's off. You can turn it on for all hangers, or you could turn it on for when a trapeze is a certain width. So say if it's over 5 feet, I want to have the center rod turned on, we can turn that on. This can be really nice if you're spanning a long distance, or if you've got a lot of very large conduits with copper in them. All right, next up is the hardware size. So much like the Mineralac or the single conduit hanger, you have the same options available here. So that's going to be the size of your rod, the size of the nuts, the washers, all that good stuff. So 1/4 inch on up to 1/2 inch there. And then next up, we'll look at our collision detection. So there's actually 2 different features here in the collision detection. First and foremost, you have collision detection. So this is just like clash detection. This is highlighting those collisions. If we turn it on, when we place our hangers, if there is a collision detected between the rod and something in our model or a linked model, this does work with linked models, it's going to highlight it, our clash highlight color. So that's down here at the bottom. By default, it's orange, but we can change it to kind of any color we like. Next up is collision adjustment. Collision adjustment will actually move our hangers to avoid those collisions. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through everything here, other than to say that you have options on what increments that it will move and test the collision from. You can adjust these to balance time of placing hangers for how accurately they get moved, right? So 6 inches might be a lot. We could turn it down to 1 inch, but it would take a little bit longer to place. And then we've also got some options in here for, do you want to move the hanger first, or do you want to stretch the hanger and make it wider first? Or do you just not want to stretch the hanger at all to avoid clashes? So you've got a lot of customizability built into this one. Lastly, here in the collision detection, we've got an option for tolerance. So according to a computer, right, as long as something is not overlapping, then hey, it's no collision. But do I really want to have my rods that are like 1/8 of an inch from something else? Well, maybe I'm okay with that, maybe I'm not, right? So by default, it's 0, but if I'm not, I can add a little extra buffer distance. So that's our tolerance here. So if we want a little working space, we can turn this on and we can move this up to 6 inches. All right, so that's our placement profile. So those are all the options available there. in our profile settings. All right, so now that we've got that, we can go ahead and we can start placing some hangers. All right, the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually go over to my options. So I want to set up my options first. First and foremost, I need to select what I'm going to attach to. Typically, nearest structure overhead is good. However, for a lot of people, you're working with linked models, right? So you'll have a structural model and an architectural model in your links. Both of those will have floors. However, they're only going to build those floors according to one model, and that's the structural model. So sometimes the architectural model has the floors lower, right? They might do 12-inch floors as just that's what they model, but the actual floors are going to be 6 inches or 3 inches, and it might be a pan deck or something like that. So commonly, you'll want to come in here and select linked model and choose your structural model. There's some other options for attachment in here. Distance below level, that's just a certain distance below. Reference plane, this one is really useful if you're hanging your trapezes from supplemental supports or supplemental steel. You can draw a reference plane in a section view, give it a name, choose that reference plane, and then you can have it attached to that instead. So this is a really powerful one when you're attaching to supplemental supports. The last thing I'll mention as we're going through this is this does work with pitched roofs or angled floors or roofs. So parking decks, no problem. Everything's going to place according to that angled of whatever it sees above it, right? All right, I see that we have a hand raised. We will have some time for Q&A here at the end. I believe there should be a Q&A button down at the bottom. So feel free to type your questions in there, and then we'll kind of get those addressed towards the end. All right, the last option that we have here is create unfiltered view for placement. This one, if you're a current Evolve customer, I encourage you to hover over this one and give it a read. What this does is it has to do with how well we can see structure. If this is checked, we'll create a new view. If it's not, we'll use what's in your current view. It's a trade-off of speed versus accuracy. If we turn this off, and I'm actually going to do it for this demo, the tool will actually run quicker. So this is a performance option here that we can enable or disable. All right, so now that we've got all that out of the way, we're finally ready to start placing some hangers. So where I'm going to place hangers is actually, I'm going to place it over here. And we're going to talk about a few things as we go. All right, so there's a couple, excuse me. All right, so the first thing I want to do here is select my profile. So I think I'm going to do 1-tier trapeze. Actually, let's do auto detect. And then we'll do 3/8 hardware, and we'll do 1 5/8 strut. All right, from here, I need to choose my mode. I have 3 modes available to me, but I need to think a little bit about what these do and how I should use them, because depending on where I'm placing my hangers, I'm going to want to change my mode. So let's look at something like this down here in the bottom right. So these look like feeders to me, pretty large conduits. There's only 4 of them coming out. That's what I'm going to use entire path, right? I know that everything's pretty straightforward in that run, so it can follow it out. Now, I wish that there was no mode here and that this was an easy button and I could just swipe the whole model and it would magically know where to place every hanger to account for things like this, right? We have conduits joining in, leaving our runs, they split off, those kind of more complex scenarios. So the tool is not, kind of aware of conduits that you do not select. So that's why we have the different modes. So you get that kind of flexibility to place them as you want, but still get the most automation possible. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is entire path with these. So we'll do entire path. We're going to select our conduits. Typically, you're going to start from one end of the other of your run, especially if you're using entire path. And for electrical, most of the time you're going to use that, it's going to be for feeders. All right, so I'm going to hit finish. And then we're going to select the direction we want to go. It says pick a direction to traverse. The only thing that I need to worry about here is that I click beyond what I've selected in the direction I want to go. So I want to come out and go beyond. So we'll just kind of click down the page. All right, so now I've clicked, and this building is actually really long. You'll see that when we zoom out. So it's thinking. So it's probably going to place at least 2, 3, 4 dozen hangars here. So we're going to kind of let this think, and then we're going to look at our hangars. So what it's doing right now is it's thinking and crunching. One piece of advice I'll give, if you're working in very large models with a lot of linked models, it can be worth not unlinking, but unloading those linked models while you're doing your hanger placement, except obviously your structure, right? All right, so we've got those placed now in here. So these placed, if we come in here and we take a little 3D view here, we can see that those placed, and we can see that there's actually a hole here. Let me turn on my linked model in here. Oops. Got a view template on here. All right, so we can see in here. Actually, I got to turn on floors. I think those are off. We have ceilings on. All right, so this is the trade-off that I'm getting here for not creating that 3D view. This floor was not visible in my view, so it didn't pick it up, right? So these stopped right here. So that's typically why you would want that view. However, there are some caveats of when you would not. So we'll kind of rerun this and show what that looks like with having that there. All right, so these all ran out. So they come out here, come in where they dump off over there, and then they come around over here. Now, looking over here, so we've got some other runs over here that stop off, right? So ultimately, in this model, they're probably not finished being run. So maybe I wouldn't be ready to run hangers yet. But what we would want to do is notice that, hey, these hangers, I need some other mode here, right? Because I want to account for these conduits on my hangers. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So I'm actually going to undo those hangers that we just placed. Okay, there we go. All right, and so I'm going to start to work with these here. All right, so in this case, I'm actually going to start over here. And we'll run that. And in my options here, all right, we'll let it attach to nearest structure overhead. We're going to create an unfiltered view this time. And I'm going to use change of direction because what I've got going on here is, first and foremost, I want to take care of this. Then, okay, that's fine. So that might make me think entire path is fine. But down here where we stop, we have a change of direction here. So we're going to run this, and then hopefully it'll make a little more sense when we run it over here, where that's more of a real world scenario. All right, so this time we're doing change of direction. We'll leave on auto detect. All right, I'm going to hit finish here and then pick my direction. And now we see this view. This view that gets created is a temporary view that the program creates. Once it's done with it, it deletes it. So it's not going to clog up your views or anything like that. It's a purely temporary view. All right, so change of direction here. We can see that it stopped where it encountered a fitting here or a change of direction. All right, so we'll take a look at that in our 3D view here. All right, so there we've got our hangers. So if we turn on our floors and ceilings here, let's just turn everything on. All right, so now we've got our hangers. And let's see, I'm not sure actually why. So I've got something going on with my linked model, why it did not actually attach to the floor. So let's see if we can sort that out. All right, we'll place a single hanger here. And we've got our right. Let's see. All right, I'm actually not sure why I'm not getting my hangers going all the way up. That is actually very odd. That's interesting. All right, so I'll have to look at my model. I've clearly got something set up wrong. So for some reason, I'm not getting my hangers going all the way up in this one, but we'll kind of keep going. All right, so here I want to talk about kind of a more crowded area of how we would kind of use the tool to get everything modeled. So I'm going to start with hanger placement. And in this case where I've got something crowded, so this could be like in a kind of a crowded area or maybe an electrical room. I'm gonna take advantage here of change of direction and single hanger. And that's what I'm gonna use to get my hangers placed the way I want, right? So in this case, let's start with change of direction. And I'm just gonna start from each end of my panels here. So we'll start here and we'll go up. Oh, I see the issue. Yep, okay. So the reason it's not, actually, we'll show this. All right, so the reason it's not going up to structure here is because it's actually adding a template that is hiding my structure in new views. So trying to get a little fancy there with our view properties there, but it's actually working against us. So let's see if that took care of it. All right, so that's what it was, right? So sometimes Revit can kind of get in our own way, but that's all it was, right? So that's why my hangers weren't going to structure. So that's all settled now. All right, so let's kind of come back to here and let's go place some more hangers. All right, so change the direction here. We'll do that again. Hit finish, come up. All right, that looks much better. Now I can actually see my linked model here. We can see that structure. All right, so you can notice it took a little bit longer running that time. I don't know if you noticed that. It took maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds. And that's because it's finding that structure there. All right, so this came out. We've got those. These we may actually want single hangers on. But if we take a look at my profile, my Minterlac is not turned on. So I've made the choice here that I actually just want, this is actually what I want. Now, typically, in the field, this is probably not what you would do. However, that's the option that I have here, right? So if this was a 4-inch, maybe that would make a little more sense. All right, so I've got that placed. So now I have the issue of, hey, I've got all these conduits coming off here. So how do I want to handle that? So most likely what I'll do here is I'm going to do hanger placement here, and this time I'm going to do single hanger. So we're going to place one here. All right, and now it's asking me to place more, but I want to come over and do it here. So we'll come over, do it here. So in doing this, right, so I'm getting my width. Maybe I'll add another one here. Maybe I'll slide that one back a little further. I might come and adjust these. All right, and then we'll place some here. So even though I'm only placing a single hanger, and that might seem like, hey, how much time am I really saving? I'm just placing one hanger here. Well, the fact is, that's a kick. We'll want to slide that one back, right? So see, that one didn't place, right? Because there's a kick here. So let's place one here. So we'll want one here just right up close to our box here. So we might be thinking to ourselves, right? Like, how much time am I really saving? It's just one hanger, right? Well, you'll notice my hanger, the width is sized. It's set to the right height, right? It's placed against my my conduits. I've got all my information here. I didn't have to go into any section view or anything like that. I didn't have to draw dimensions. I didn't have to enter any parameter values. So even when I'm just using this for one hanger in this, really crowded area, I probably am saving myself, 2, 3, 4 minutes per hanger. Um, sometimes people will think, oh, well, if I can't just swipe everything and place the hangers, like, am I saving any time? Well, yeah, you are. You're saving, you're saving a lot of time. If you've ever actually had to go through and do this yourself manually, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we'll place a couple more single hangers here. All right, so let that one place. This one I probably could have used change of direction on since I'm getting 2 in here, but that'll be okay. All right, so over here, so I think in about maybe 5 to 10 minutes as we're kind of talking through this, I've got this whole panel for the most part. I've got hangers for it all, right? So I can actually do all of this, and this I could probably do in about 15 minutes, maybe 20 with going back and tweaking things. So what a time saver there. All right. All right. One thing I do want to mention is seismic supports. We're about to move on to mechanical and ITM hangers. But before we do that, I will mention seismic supports. And I'm going to show you kind of 2 ways to use this tool. Seismic supports, so not everybody does this in their area, but for a big part of North America, seismic is a concern, so we do have that tool. All right, to use this tool, I'm going to select my hangers that I want to place my seismic supports on, hit finish, and then I have some options to choose from. Much like our hangers, you have attachment options. We also have your placement options. So we've got a generic family in here for seismics. This is really about coordinating right now. In the future, we'll be adding more families that better support like bill of materials and those types of things. But for now, the tool is really, really just good for clashing. Next up is our attachment method. So where do we want that to attach? Ideally, we want to match as close to real world as possible. So we can go edge of strut, or we can go center of rod. I'm going to choose center of rod. And then we have our angles. These can be a little confusing, but if you hover over, it will describe with a picture what it means. So our angle 1, we're going to leave that as 45. And then my angle 2, I'm actually going to enable, well, we'll leave that off for this one, and I'll show you the other thing here in another one. All right, so I hit OK now, and I have my seismic hangers placed. So those are now in here. They go and they attach to structure, just like our trapeze. So that's all well and good. And the thing that I want to show you guys is I can move these around. They will go on the X and Y plane. They'll move around with the trapeze. So that's really nice. The only thing is if you adjust the elevation, you'll have to update the hanger elevation parameter. So pretty handy there. All right, so what if you say, hey, I need to support it from 2 directions, right? So I need 2 on each side. So how do I do that? All right, so that's what our angle 2 is for. So in this case, I'm going to do angle 1, and I'm going to enable angle 2. So this time I'm going to set it to 45. And depending on your model, you may have to kind of play with this a little bit to get your angles of which angle you need to choose. But in this case, I think we've got it. So now I'm just going to add 45 to 90, and we're going to place seismics again. All right, so that time didn't quite come out to where I wanted. So we'll try that again. Let's try 90. I don't think that's correct, but let's try that. Let's try 180. Oh. All right, so this is what I think I need to do. Oops. Finish here. I think maybe if we go to 0. All right. So that didn't quite get it. We can actually adjust these manually. So I think it should have been 135. Okay, so that's why, because they're on different. So this one's actually going to be 180. All right, so that one I may need to look at. But generally speaking, this is how you would place two. I'm gonna have to look into why that one was behaving a little funky. All right, so that is our seismic supports for the hangars. All right, so now we're going to move over to mechanical and talk about ITM hangars. All right, so in mechanical, you can do everything that I just showed you when it comes to hangar placement. So all of that is in here as well. Whoops. So we'll check that first. All right. So we can do that as well. Everything we just did, we can also do in mechanical, except for those single pipe or single duct, I guess you might want to think of it that way, hangars. That's where high TM hangars are going to come in for those. All right, so the only difference in here is for my trapezes, I can select fabrication instead, and it'll work just like the other one did, except I'll be placing fabrication ITM parts. So I can choose what service I want to pull it from, and then what hanger that I want to pull. So that's the big difference there. All right, so I think we'll work with these. So I'm actually going to isolate these. So we'll say that these are running at different heights, which is very common. So much of this actually might be at the same height. It might just change elevations here. So it probably actually is. However, most of the time from what I've seen from mechanicals is there's a lot of pipes going all over the place. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to isolate a few more of these actually just to kind of show the power of this tool. All right, and then we'll take our drainage here as well. All right, and I'm going to do a temporary isolate on these. All right, so actually, let's just hide the duct. We'll do that. All right, so we're going to say that we're just doing plumbing and pipe fitting right now. All right, so we'll hide our duct. All right, so now we've got our pipes. So realistically down here, we're going to be placing trapezes. So I'm not going to select those for our ITM hangers. We're just going to select this. And then we'll say that we're going to come back and place hangers for this. All right. So when it comes to our ITM hangers, we've got settings for that as well. So thinking about that hanger workflow, we're going to come in and we're going to set up our settings. All right. By default, out of the box, you probably have some settings in here. Probably not this many. This many you'll find in the sample model. But we'll kind of look through and talk about these. So this may look intimidating at first. However, we've got help documentation on our help site that you can look at. And then we also have Evolve University that we recently added. That's a place, it's free, it comes with the license. We have short videos that walk you through exactly what I'm doing right now, all the picks and clicks explaining every kind of detail of each column here. So we've got you covered when it comes to education and training. All right, so here in the hanger configuration, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but I'm going to say kind of what the general idea is here that we're doing. The first thing is applying to. So what this does is this gives us a ton of customization. So depending on what I'm placing my hanger on, so what being what service, what material, what size, I can place a different hanger. I could have different hanger spacing. And yeah, that's really it. So what I'm doing here is I have a lot of customization. So we can see here if we go by material. So for aluminum, depending on the type of duct, I've got different rules, right? For mild steel, or let's look at say PVC, right? So for PVC, I've only got one rule. It covers every size. And I'm just placing clevis hangers on those. So you see a ton of these, you might think, hey, that's really confusing. That's intimidating. what it's for is to allow you to customize to match the job specs, right? Everybody, we're all kind of doing the same thing, right? We're all building buildings, but we all do it a little bit different. And the engineers always have a little bit different specs for every job because the owners ask for different things. So what we've got here is the ability for you to customize it as much as you need to. You don't have to. You can keep it simple. You could have just one type. So for all pipe work, for any service, and for any material and any size, I can place the same hanger. If you want to keep it that simple, if that fits your job requirements, you can certainly do that. However, I've got options here to customize as needed. All right, so the placement here, this is going to be where our hangers get placed. I've got my spacing, so that one from end, that's the end. From joint, that's our joints or say our couplings. And then handling for branches and taps as well. What I typically say if you just getting started, put something in for all of these. You can see some of these are NA. The more of these you fill out, the more hangers you'll get. It's a lot easier to delete hangers than it is to add hangers. Lastly here, we're selecting which hanger we're going to place. So based on the service that you've selected over here, we're going to load in this drop down all the hangers that are in that service, or if you do any, all of the services loaded into your project. So you can choose the hanger that you want to use. And then you can actually specify a different hanger if that pipe or duct has insulation on it. So if you want to specify a different one, you can come specify it in this column. If you don't care, you want the same hanger, don't worry, just don't fill it out, right? And we'll place the same hanger. Next up are some of our hanger options. There's an option here to use half perimeter for rectangular duct. This has to do with smackness sizing. So those of you that are familiar with that, we've got you covered on that. Collision adjustment. So this is very similar to what we looked at in the hanger placement. You've got options for how those move, and you can even ignore some things if you want to ignore certain patterns. All right, and then we can highlight the ones that we couldn't move, flagging you to let you know, hey, I need to go through and move these manually. All right, next up, I've got the embed configuration. This actually goes into another tool of ours with rod adjustments. So I won't go through all of these, but I'll just kind of go in to say, with ITM hangers, very different from family hangers. We cannot actually nest families inside them because they're not families. So this gives you a way to actually place embeds. If you want to get a count of embeds, this is the tool to do that with. I guess since I'm on this topic, I'll mention points. We do handle points for ITM hangers. It's all handled automatically in the background by our point manager. You don't actually have to place any points. It's a really, really, really nice tool. All right, so that's really kind of our settings here for our ITM settings. So let's go in and let's place some ITM hangers. All right, so this one I like a lot more than the other one, only because this one is truly an easy button. I can just go in and select everything I want. Since we don't have to worry about trapezes with things joining and leaving, we're just following out each run and we're placing hangers according to how you specified. So I'm going to hit finish here. And in a few seconds, we're going to have hangers on all of these. So I could isolate a service or a run if I just wanted to place it on that at one time. I could go ahead and place it on everything on a floor or just an area if I need. All right, so I got one part where there might be an issue. Okay, so that one I can check out. All right, so let's take a look at our hangers. All right, so we've got all of our hangers placed over here. We've got these going on down here, hangers up here, and you can actually see the ones orange here. I know I've got a clash here. So if I wanted, I could come through and I could select these, or I could see, do I have my linked model turned on in this view? I think I do. So this one, I could come in, let's make a 3D view of it, come down and look. Yep, that hanger's running through a duct. I need to move this one. So really, really awesome feature here. So we could go ahead and, that's what we have off is our duct. So we can go ahead and turn that back on Now I can see clearly here it's the duct, right? One nice thing about this clash highlighting is that it also highlights what it's clashing with. So really nice there. I can take a look at that. All right, so here we've got all of our hangers. Now it might be, hey, maybe this is the settings that I had it on. Maybe I need more. I think the reason I didn't get any there is because most of these have NA from joint. Again, I highly encourage you, especially if you're just starting out, fill all of these out. Otherwise, you might see this and you're asking yourself, why did I not get a hanger there? Well, that's because that's how you set it up. So fill those out, check out our documentation, sign up for our Evolve University if you're already a customer. We go in depth on all of these. All right, yeah, so that's our hangers. And that's the ITM hangers. Let's see. I think in a few minutes here, we're going to go through Q&A. The last thing that I want to do before we do that is just kind of take a look at the family hangers themselves and talk a little bit about those briefly. All right, so those hangers, I'm actually going to we'll pull here over from our family browser, and we'll look at our hangers. All right, and then take a look at these. All right, and then we'll put one with, we'll just do one with no hardware here. All right. So these are our hanger families. Just for the sake of time, I only put one with no hardware. As we can see on the ones with hardware, we've got square washers, lock washers, nuts on it. Most of the time, you don't need that level of detail, and you'll find yourself using the no hardware ones. Just looks like a piece of strut with a rod. It's up to you which one you want to use. These individual pieces will schedule out. If you can select it and rev it, it'll schedule out. So that's the difference between the hangers. They're completely customizable once you've placed them. We can do things like, this is a common question. So if we detach one and then turn on our center rod. Let's see, center rod, turn that on. All right, I can make, hey, the top one, or maybe it was the bottom one, I only need it to go over part way. You can do that. We can create, you can completely manipulate the family. As you can see here, there's quite a few parameters, more tiers, more parameters. This one here, we can see there's only maybe a dozen or two that you have to mess with if you want to customize it. So that's the hanger families. The last thing I'll show in relation to those are our schedules. We do have schedules out of the box in our template that go with all of these family hangers. So if we go to prefab trapeze, these are build schedules for all of them. We've got legends that go with this as well. So we see some information across the top, but what does that mean? Does my shop or my field know what that means when I put this on a sheet? We've got legends. So you can take these legends, drop them on your sheets. They know exactly how to build it, and they know what those columns mean and what those parameters really are referring to. So we've got build schedules on up to 4 tiers. So you can see this one's a pretty hefty schedule when you get up to 4 tiers, but it's got everything I need to build it. Not needing to dimension, I don't really need to tag things. Maybe I tag the label if it's got a number, and we're doing that. But keeps it all very contained. Trapeze by assembly. This gives me a count of all my assemblies. I know how many trapezes I've got. We could modify this and do it by level or by area, things like that. We've got rod assemblies, how many rod assemblies we've actually got in there, threaded rod supports. And then if you're using the hardware, we can actually go down to the bill of materials. So whether you're using the hardware or not, you're going to see the counts of strut and rods. However, if you're using hardware, we even got the number of flat washers in here. So if that's of interest to you to get the counts from the model, to keep track of what you should be purchasing for a job, you've got that ability in here. we've got a trapeze cut list. This is really great on your spool sheets or your build sheets that you're producing, right? I know what I need to cut and how long I need to cut it. So I need 10 pieces of 1 5/8 slotted strut, and I need them 24 inches long. Really, really useful there. Trapeze, this is kind of like the mother of all schedules. This will handle all of your trapezes, nice and color coded, but it's got information for everything. So it's kind of like a super schedule with a lot of these other ones there. All right. So I know I kind of covered that's kind of quick, but we've got some time here at the end for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and get those submitted, and I'll go ahead and start answering. All right, so we've got a question here. If the reference planes get adjusted in the middle of coordinating a space, will all the related hanger attachments adjust to the new elevation, i.e., if there are changes with structural steel elevations? No, they won't. And ultimately, that's just kind of how Revit works at the end of the day. The hanger does not know that the structure is there. Evolve can ask the model, right? Is there structure there? And we set the parameter value. But there's no way to actually kind of tie that parameter to that structure overhead. So if it does move, no, you're not going to know that. And so you're going to adjust that. So that's seems like something you would definitely want to know if they did change it. Maybe they shouldn't have, or if they did, you definitely want to be aware because that's probably going to have a large cost impact. But to answer your question succinctly, no, the hangers are not aware if the structural steel or the floor moves. It's kind of placed there, and that's where it is. All right, next question here. When placing hangers, is the temporary view created with the global workset settings? Global workset settings, yes, it is. We actually had, so there was a bug where, and you kind of almost saw a little bit of that today, where some things may be hidden. If you're using this tool, be careful of applying a new view template automatically. In the current version, any issues with the global workset settings should be corrected. So it should unhide any invisible worksets. All right, next question here. What 3D view did you take the view template off of since it creates a temporary 3D view? Okay, that's a good question. It doesn't matter, it's any 3D view, because actually what I'm doing is I'm editing the type, and the type is 3D view. So it doesn't actually matter what view, because I'm not editing the view. I'm actually editing the type parameters of the 3D view type. Hopefully that makes some sense. All right, can you walk through creating a schedule with the hangers? We don't have enough time for that. What I will say is we have the hangers that we looked at before. And if you would like any help kind of modifying these, that is absolutely something that you can contact us at our support line about, and we're happy to kind of help walk you through some of that, of kind of getting you acquainted with what the parameters are and that type of deal. So we've got our contact support button here where you can reach out for help on those types of things. All right, let's mark those. All right, so I see we've got one more here. All right, how do you do a trapeze schedule for a certain area of trapezes instead of the whole project? That's a great question. You have multiple options. Either one, you can go and select them all in your view. So you could do that, and then you could set a parameter. Ultimately, you're going to need a parameter, right, to filter by, because that's how Revit filters schedules. So you could do it manually, or we actually have a tool for that. So one of our features, locations, is exactly that tool. So I can come in and Let me turn these on so we can see them. There should actually be some locations in here already. All right, so if we take this location over here, so I've got a location here called 1B1. And if we look at my properties here, there's a parameter in here called EVLBSID. This is added by the tool, right? So if I want to schedule these by that, I'll go and I'll assign location. And maybe we just want to 1B-1. We could do the entire project either way. So we can go and do that. Let it update here. We're going to reassign. We've got some options there for overlapping locations. All right, and now if we look in here, EVLBSID is 1B-1. And then I could go and I could create a new schedule for here. And then let's actually just show that. EV underscore. All right, that does not want to cooperate today. All right, so we'll scroll down here. EVLBSID, we'll add it on here. We'll do EVLBSID equals 1B-1. All right, now I've created a schedule for, we'll call this 1B-1, one tier trapeze build schedule. So it's really that simple. Yep, of how to do that. Very, very handy feature there with the locations. I like that one a lot. All right, let's see. All right, so we've got another question here. Is there any method for a 5+ tier? Often have up to 6. No, there's not. That may, it looks like that may change in the future. We're actually working on a redesign of the hangers, of the hanger tools, to kind of open it up more. And that it's one of the requirements of that is that will be possible. So not today, maybe in the future, but definitely keep your eyes peeled on the patch notes if that's something that you are looking for. All right. So that was the last question. I'll give it another few seconds here if any last questions come in. All right. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Marina here to wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Jason, and thank you to everyone for attending the webinar today. I hope that you found the information useful. We are going to be sending the recording out, and you can always find the recording available on the Evolve YouTube channel. Please make sure to follow us on social media to keep up with all of our upcoming webinars and events. We have MEP Force coming up in Milwaukee this Thursday. So if you're in the greater Milwaukee area, you can go to our website. It's right there on the main page. Go check it out. And if you're going to be going to Advancing Prefab, or if you live in the greater Denver area, on February 28th, we are going to be having an MEP Force event in Denver. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.